This is Yakuza Kiwami. We're on Xbox Series X, taking a look at this first entry in the series, well, the remake of the initial entry in the Yakuza franchise. There is Yakuza 0 if you want to see what a prequel is like. Anyways, with that, we're getting the retained enhancements of the game. That's 1440p, 60 FPS, Auto Hdr Support. It's a bit of a weird situation. I'm not interested in joining your club thing. You want me to bounce? Oh no! So anyways, this initial story is very much a younger Kuro-san, and he basically served jail time. He's out, there's missing money, he's got a rivalry with someone that's making their way up. There's some interesting situations happening, some neat dynamics, some back and forth conflicts. It's obviously a very dramatic situation. Like I say with each of the Yakuza titles, you can jump into any of them and you can have a good time. I do highly suggest, though, starting with Yakuza 0 and making your way 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the franchise. That's the best way to kind of get the full story, because you're kind of seeing the scope of this character's life, and I think that's really interesting and worthwhile. And these remakes do a really good job of improving the world and the style of it. So I also play on an easier difficulty because you kind of it could be a little bit grindy combat wise, like brawling wise. So there's no shame, I always say in these Yakuza titles, just to do something a little easier if you want to engage with the the narrative of it. And we're just doing like a little bit of a side story. So this one has an interesting kind of combat system to it, where you can kind of engage in these different battle setups, so it's just kind of neat. And it just kind of sort of adjusts how you fight, what you can do with the environment, and they're neat little things, and you got like a skill system. And yeah, it's somewhat an open world that you're exploring, just in regards to the areas you visit and the things you do in it. But yeah, it's actually really well done. I think file save wise, we're like, this is, I don't know when this one is. It's like a number of hours and several hours into the game, this particular save. Thought it was a good point. This club's bouncer. Italian scarf. I will look so fancy. But yeah, this is a sub-story. So the game, has a lot of main story things, but it also has like a really lengthy core narrative to it, where again, it's really shocking, really dramatic. There's intense things going on, and it's sort of neat too. So this is one where you get a little bit more like evasion options in regards to dealing with the various enemies that are nearby. We'll go back to Rush. Rush is like my kind of easygoing fast thing, because you can just like annihilate people pretty quickly. But yeah, this is a world where you can get through it decently fast if you don't want to have to deal with these kind of thugs. Sometimes you get forced into it, but it's not to the degree of randomness that some of the Yakuza titles seem to have, where you're like run into somebody right away, which is like really quite annoying. But anyways, yeah, it's just a very well done title. I think all the Yakuza games are really great in their own ways. They do neat things. But this one's a lot of fun too. I prefer the second one out in the most out of the series, but it's kind of just preference. But I think they did some really neat things with the combat, the scale of the world, the things you can jump into and see, and the things you can do. Because you got this really serious story, and then there's like this really almost like casual, sort of almost funny side story things that you can do, sub-stories, and they're just really neat. So the world itself, beautifully detailed, really neat in regards to the style of them, the scale. But at the same time, in this title particularly, you seem to notice a lot more kind of environmental pop-in regards to like AI kind of roaming around, some of the items kind of popping in, or some of the texture things. And it just seems like they don't necessarily fully optimize the world to the perfect degree that we could be getting. Now with that, it's still great. You really won't notice or care too much about this kind of stuff, because you'll be having a a great time kind of battling around, taking out the enemies and stuff like that. So, I mean, you know, it's just really kind of interesting. Well, this one got a bit of a blocking problem too, but not as bad. Yakuza 3's got like a nasty like AI enemy blocking system to it. It drives me nuts. But anyways, yeah, you just get like kind of cool combat. It's got neat skills. I'll have the boost, and different things do different scenarios. It's just like a very, you know, well done title. It's very interesting, very unique world that you are experiencing, and it's really cool because you can swap between, you know, these different Yakuza titles, and you can see sort of how the world evolves and how they change. They're a lot more consistent than they used to be, obviously, with this being like a remake of that original, you know, setup. But at the same time, they do have all these little smaller things to them that I think come together in a really satisfying way that you can, you know, thoroughly enjoy, whether you're working through the main story or trying to get through the, I don't know, dozens of hours of extra stuff that you can kind of jump into with all these weird situations. From what? Oh, that doesn't sound good. Sounds like somebody's always got some sort of problem that our pal here has to deal with. Unbelievable, these people. But yeah, it's just like it's a really cool living type world. You can go into the different stores. They're always filled with lots of detail, lots of combative moments, whether you are fighting, you know, the thugs that we've been seeing around, or if we are fighting against something like a boss type character where they've got, you know, stacks of extra life, and you know, it's very, very interesting anyways. And of course there's a little bit of mature language as well as you're seeing in this one, but yeah, I wouldn't say outside of like it's anything too intense outside of that. It's just kind of the style of it. But yeah, it's definitely a really interesting thing. There's a bar nearby. And then you can go to the bar, and there's like tons of little mini games and stuff you can do. It's got like lots of really different types of content, I guess you could say. Like, it's a game that's filled with all these like smaller things you can engage with. All these different character moments. Some of it's cinematically driven, some of it is like text that you're kind of jumping through. You know, you get a good mix here. Are you? This is interesting. Again, like this character is a lot younger here, and you kind of see that reflected in the story that you're working through. And then, you know, you kind of see him age through each of the games. So that's why it's good to play the whole scope of his story, is so that you actually kind of see his life, and you get, at least myself, I've noticed this more and more into who this character is and everything like that. All the quirky, weird adventures that he's had over the years. And it's just kind of really well done. And this one is particularly neat just due to the setup of it. Just in terms of how he has to deal with certain situations, where he kind of falls in line after entering this very different world, and then on top of that, all of the honor and dealing with the different factions of his. Like, it's so dynamic in this series because it's very hard for me to initially get into it because there's so many different like levels and tiers of like their group clans that they're part of as being the Yakuza, and yeah, it's just wild. I'm actually surprised we're doing this. Karaoke's a blast, and you know, everything like that. This game's just like chock full of weird, quirky adventures that you can go on, and it's just like the weirdest situation sometimes in this one. You know, in terms of what you can find yourself doing, because it's so serious usually, but this one, I feel like this is some kind of weird trap or something like that, and I'm gonna lose all my money. Okay, this definitely seems like a bit of a trap. I don't know about you guys, but what do you think, barkeep? Just gonna take all my money? Anyways, this was like something they were trying to do for a long time. I think it had a very warm reception to it in regards to improving that initial version that we're never, like, we won't probably see on this platform, I don't think, ever. So that's interesting that we're able to actually get this sort of cleaned up version of it to really understand the characters and the world more, get the improved fighting sequences, see what this has to offer with the techniques and the battles. Uh-oh. Oh no. That's pretty dark, actually. Did she slip something in there? I've actually not done this, like, side venture. I don't know. I am not alright. Oh, I knew it. Why didn't you warn me, man? How much did I lose? Did I lose it all? How much did I lose? Okay, and then there's like your abilities, so you kind of upgrade things like an RPG system, your inventory, which are like basically potions you use, and you get different items. Oh, it's interesting. And, you know, different chapters, it's just very well done. And you've got this like large-scale world that you can enjoy and work through. And it's neat to see the dynamics of all like the different places, and then play like a different title like Yakuza 3 and see that, you know, just kind of how it's improved, because those ones are like remasters, whereas this is an actual like remake of that experience. You can see the improvements, you can see the changes and the adjustments to each of the games in the series, and to me that's kind of cool too, because it's just so dynamically wild, kind of having to swap between them and understanding some of the adjustments that are made to those experiences that do different things. Oh, this health is going down. Take it as a life lesson, I don't want to. I'm not happy about my losses. Ooh, lots of people to fight, of course, on the streets if you want to run into people for brawling. And then you can go in and you can buy food and stuff. Oh, we gotta actually find like a food shop that we can kind of go to. I'm actually surprised the waiter just let that gal con her way into my soul. It's definitely weird. Yeah, you get some kind of cool shops, like not that one. Trying to find a cool food place you can go into. Yeah, I guess this doesn't look like a store you can actually enter. The Jewel. Oh, I don't want to go to that place. Oh no! But yeah, you can see you can actually kind of get out of the way. In like Yakuza 3 and stuff like that, they just kind of like pop up and you have to fight, and it's just like, ugh, I'm trying to do other stuff. But you get this like cool sense of scale in the world. The running is a nice feature as well. You know, in some of them you can only run during like certain chase scenes, and it's just, and it's quite fascinating to see this particular entry in the series, see what it has to offer, and do things in it again, because I think the games are so good. But mostly to summarize, fun adventures, good story, great characters. This lead here is just fantastic. I've loved seeing the changes of the character between the different entries, and then, you know, you look past that and you're kind of like, wow, you know, this is something to get into. You know, I highly suggest doing 0 and making your way through all of them. This being, you know, the first, as to say, but not necessarily your first entry in the series, because I think that prequel adds a lot of context to the world and to the characters, because you get to see a really young version of this character. Like, this character's pretty, like, just kind of starting out and stuff, but the 0 really does, I think, change things up in some really exciting ways. This one, the combat stuff is kind of really fun and engaging in that style, but yeah, there's something about how, you know, how it changes every game is just kind of really fascinating, because it's like minor adjustments to kind of get used to what's new, but at the same time, it's like, oh, you know, you gotta really tweak how you're engaging with things. Oh, and there's like the Sega arcades and stuff are fun too. Trying to mention every little element of this franchise that I can, so you understand a full scope of what the experience is like, and, you know, get an extra level of appreciation for what Yakuza is all about, especially Yakuza Kiwami.